As Russia's invasion escalates, the fallout is being felt worldwide, and many countries are experiencing energy shortages, hunger scares, and supply chain chaos. So joining me now is Michael Bociurkiw. He is a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council's Eurasia Center and has been following the war in Ukraine. I'm so glad you're here. And I'm going to just kind of almost speed through these questions because we don't have anywhere near enough time to talk about this. But I want to talk about the global impact of this conflict, which we were talking earlier. It should have been contained, but because we live the way we live in this global environment, the tentacles reach far and wide. Can you give us a sense of just how bad it could get if this conflict continues? And are we feeling it yet?
Sure. Well, good to be with you. You know, that's why we should be calling this a global war, not a Ukraine-Russia war, is because we are so interconnected these days. Of course, we found that during the pandemic that any little disruption caused by war or climate or whatever has ripple effects almost immediately. And we saw that as soon as the Russians invaded on February 24th. Sadly, Marie, I mean, if those sanctions, those biting sanctions had been introduced before the bombs started falling, I think we would have been in a better place right now.
And so are we actually feeling the results of the sanctions yet? Because I thought to myself, well, you know, wheat is bought way ahead of time. Gas is purchased way ahead of time. I don't know if we're actually feeling it yet.
Not yet. I mean, you will talk to some consumers in Europe, for example, and they're not able to get Ukrainian sunflower oil, which is they're a major producer of it. But I think that within Russia, they're not feeling the sanctions, and they should have been now. That's why I think we need to do more. For example, Russians, the wealthy Russians, instead of going to the south of France, they're going to Dubai. They're going to countries which have not imposed sanctions. So as soon as you tighten that noose even further around Mr. Putin, I think then you will see deterrence, and then you will see us not as vulnerable to the sanctions, higher gas prices, things like that.
I want to talk about something that we don't actually typically talk about, a sector that's being impacted, the media sector.
Absolutely. So the Ukrainian media went into this war in pretty weak shape anyway, but what's happened now is the advertising market has totally collapsed. So you have a lot of major media outlets that say they're going to run out of cash by the end of the summer. I've spent the past few days with folks from the Kyiv Independent, the leading English language voice in Ukraine, and they've fundraised themselves, but they also say they need not only support, but things like mental health support as well, because these are journalists who have been working 24/7 nonstop since the war began, and they're feeling the effects too.
Yes. So we saw sort of a number of world leaders visit Kyiv, and several of them suggesting that they would support Ukraine becoming a member of the EU. Here's the thing, is even before the war, I think it would have been a challenge for Ukraine to become a member. There are many, many, many steps. Having a healthy, robust economy is one of them, and that's something that Ukraine does not have now. How realistic is this? Or is this just really more of a show of support?
Well, Ukraine membership for NATO is pretty much off the table, but I think that's fine with most Ukrainians. But they really do want EU membership. I think above and beyond anything else, this is so moral. It's so important to them psychologically because they feel they're fighting for Europe in this war. They're in between Russia and the rest of Europe. So that's one. But the other thing is Ukrainians are going to have to show that they're doing things like reform in the judiciary where there's a lot of corruption. How you do that during a time of conflict, I don't know, but it's very important that the Ukrainian government not let that slide, because a lot of Ukrainians feel like we're fighting the war against Russia, but we cannot give up the fight against corruption because it affects every one of us.
Yeah, and I want to ask you about these American fighters that are missing now. 3 at this point that we know of. It looks like there's a possibility that at least 2 of them may have been captured, and if that's the case, I don't know what the outcome would be. What sort of fate do they face if they have been captured?
Yeah, well, I saw the interviews with the families early on. My heart goes out to them, but we're not sure whether they're actually in the hands of the Russian military or even worse, the Russian-backed thugs in Donetsk. If it's the second one, I can't be too hopeful because they are notorious for inhumane behavior, for torture. You know, I hope that these gentlemen are going to be safe and freed, but again, they have a long track record in Donetsk of being very, very tough on journalists, on people who are captured. And the Russians have also said, as you know, that because they're so-called mercenaries, they may not fall under the rules of the Geneva Convention. So everything needs to be done, of course, to free them.
I don't know if I'm being sort of naive, but I thought maybe it would be a bridge too far. I know, in that story we played some sort of talking heads in Russia saying, well, yes, it's a death penalty. But I felt that perhaps Russia would feel like that would be a step too far. We're talking about American citizens. Well,
I've said many, many times, as soon as we think we've hit the basement on Russia's inhumanity to humanity, they surprise us and go even further, weaponizing grain, weaponizing energy, weaponizing migration. It's really sickening to see the attitude of Russian authorities when it comes to children, to migrants, that sort of thing. So, of course, we hope the best for them, but the Russians do not have a track record of even treating their own people well.
Michael, it's always great talking to you. I wish I could talk to you for an hour. Thank you so much.
Pleasure.